Issue number 7.
Okay, thank you.
We're running short on time, so we can try to run through these. So we have a list of state operation adjustments to the budget. Okay, please proceed. Department of, is it this list right here?
Yes.
Department of Finance.
Or, I'm sorry, no. It
Okay.
can be, well, who would like to go first? Does it make sense? Maybe
Who should go first? Who do you think? Finance.
Just went there. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Melissa Ng with the Department of Finance. Just to give a brief overview, the governor's budget provides a total of $355.5 million for state operations support for the Department of Education. Of that amount, $56.5 million in general fund, $156 million in federal fund, and $32.5 million in other funds support approximately 1,500 positions at the Department of Education. Additionally, $47.5 million in general fund, $52.6 million in Prop 98 general fund, and $10.4 million in other funds supports approximately 1,000 positions at the state special schools. For the specific adjustments outlined in the agenda, I'll give a brief overview of each issue, and I'll let my colleagues come up and answer any specific questions that you may have on a particular issue, since they span across different assignments. Moving on to the first item, the governor's budget provides one-time funding of $3.7 million to support the second year of the contract with the legal firm representing the Department of Education, the State Board of Education, and the Superintendent of Public Instruction in the Cruz versus the State of California lawsuit, in which students attending Compton, Los Angeles, Oakland, and West Contra Costa Unified School Districts allege that they are receiving far less meaningful learning time than their peers in most California public schools, which results in an unconstitutional deprivation of basic educational equity. Thank you.
CDE and then Elio.
Okay, CDE.
We appreciate the additional funding and are in support.
Okay. LAO.
Rachel Ehlers, LAO. Your agenda says recommendation pending. That's because we just had a briefing from CD, several legislative staff a couple of days ago. It sounds as though the case is ongoing, the costs are being incurred. The Attorney General recused herself from representing the state in this, so the department had to contract. So we'd recommend continuing to monitor what the costs will be and not providing more funding until it's needed, but it appears that this additional appropriation is needed at this time.
Okay, thank you. Next issue.
The second issue, the governor's budget provides $250,000 in one-time funding to meet the requirements of AB 1719, which was chaptered last year and requires an evaluation of full-day and part-day kindergarten programs from across the state, and a report to be submitted to the legislature by July 1st, 2017.
Okay, CDE.
So we actually do have a concern with this amount. We believe that we need additional resources between $500,000 and $600,000. It's our understanding that the $250,000 amount was given to us based upon a prior study. We would argue that that is not a very complete study, and it frankly depends upon the quality of work that folks are looking for. In fact, we had to plead with UC Davis in order to accept an amount of resources in order to fund that report. So we would request to look at this as the budget moves forward.
Thank you.
In our review of this, the amount provided by the Department of Finance seemed sufficient, but we're happy to take a look at additional details CD may provide.
Okay. Next issue.
The next issue, the governor's budget provides $107,000 in ongoing funding for one existing position to address civil rights complaints and appeals, and also $100,000 in one-time funding for the department to address the current backlog of complaints.
CDE.
We appreciate the additional resources, and this is specifically tied to a later item on the agenda.
Okay. LAO.
Recommend approval.
Okay. Next issue.
For the next issue, the governor's budget provides $177,000 and 1.5 positions to meet the requirements of SB 949, which was chaptered last year and establishes the Distinguished After-School Health Recognition Program and requires the department to develop guidelines for how after-school programs qualify for the recognition program, as well as post which programs achieve certification on their website.
We appreciate the additional resources and believe we can make it work within that amount.
We believe this implements the legislation as was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor, so we recommend approval.
Okay, thank you. Next issue.
For the next issue, the governor's budget provides $151,000 to backfill federal public school charter grant funding that is expected to be reduced in the budget year. This funding would support a portion of 3 existing state board staff.
Okay. Okay.
So the department doesn't really have a position on this because this is not our staff load. It's the State Board of Education.
Thank you.
We had recommended waiting for the May revision just to see if there was any additional federal funds or carryover before adopting this proposal.
Okay. Next issue.
The governor's budget provides a one-time funding of $137,000 to meet the requirements of AB 2276 that was chaptered last year, and the funding would be used to work with entities to study counties that successfully transfer juvenile court school students back to other schools, develop a statewide model for successful practices, and to prepare a report with recommendations by January 1st, 2016.
We believe the amount of resources is sufficient to implement the bill.
This implements legislation that was passed by the legislature, signed by the governor, so we recommend approval.
Okay. Next issue.
The governor's budget provides $135,000 in one-time funding for the department to meet the requirements of SB 1165, which was also chaptered last year. The funding would allow the department to contract with a researcher to draft sex trafficking and sexual abuse section to be considered by the Instructional Quality Commission for possible inclusion in the next version of the state's health framework for California public schools.
Mm-hmm. Now, is this for certain grades? Was it middle school? Is that the focus? Do you remember?
So this bill actually covers, I believe, all grade levels, which is one of the reasons we need the outside contractor, is because we don't necessarily have information on this topic right now. There's nothing to pull from, essentially, for all grade levels.
Okay. Aaliyah?
Implements legislation, recommend approval.
Okay. Next issue.
The governor's budget provides one-time funding of $85,000 for 9 months of an independent project oversight consultant. Caltech required an oversight consultant for 2 years, and the 2014-15 Budget Act provided the first year of funding. Savings from the first year of funding can be carried over to cover the remaining 3 months.
This, in combination with the amount in April letter, we believe covers the department's needs.
Okay.
Recommend approval.
Okay. Next issue.
The governor's budget provides $61,000 in ongoing funding to upgrade a position from an associate governmental program analyst to an education consultant, and also converts 2 positions that were provided in 2014-15 from limited term to permanent in the early education and support division to support increased workload.
This would resolve our workload shortage.
In our assessment of the workload of the department, we believe these positions are justified and recommend approval.
Okay. Next issue.
The governor's budget provides $43,000 in one-time funding to meet the requirements of AB 1993, which was chaptered last year, and the funding would be used to assemble and post a training module on bullying and cyberbullying, utilizing existing resources, including federal training materials and school safety training coordinators.
We believe that the amount is sufficient to implement the bill.
This implements legislation. We'd recommend approval, and we'll just note that for the record that it's bullying and cyberbullying prevention, not bullying and cyberbullying training.
Okay. Perfect. We'll note that. Thank you.
Next item, the governor's budget provides $3.6 million in general fund and $2.5 million in federal fund to support the standardized account code structure system replacement project. The system is used to collect and report financial data from school districts, county offices of education, and some charter schools.
So we're still working through this item, and there should be a May revise item on this.
Yeah, we'd recommend holding open until the May revision and also until the legislature sees the Section 11 budget letter that's coming forth with a revised full summary of the plan for this project.
Okay. And maybe if you can address this question, CDE, and I know this could be a long answer, but it's limited resources, a lot of demands over there in the department. Any big things that you or Mr. Torlakson want to report that or not addressed in this budget that need possibly taking a look at?
So we have three proposals pending that we are hopeful will be in May revise. The first of which is staffing for the adult education proposal, whatever ends up coming out of the governor's budget in this legislative process. We have no positions in the Department of Education that are funded with state dollars in adult education, so we would need something depending upon our role. Additionally, we have a request pending for additional staff in order to implement the governor's career technical education grants. It would require staff to essentially send those grants out and monitor them. Then lastly, the larger request we have is related to the standards support office. So this request covers essentially several components that are within 98 and outside of 98. It would essentially request $640,000 for staff in order to recreate an office to implement standards implementation. We did have a Common Core implementation office last year that we were forced to shut down due to budget cuts. So it would bring some of those staff back, plus additional staff. They would be working on communication to the field on implementing the Common Core standards as well as the next generation science standards when those come out online. We've heard very clearly from the field that there is a lack of consistent information going out, and that's leading to uneven implementation of these standards, and we believe that will help. Quickly, the only other things in there that are Proposition 98 is there is approximately $1.5 million we will receive as a refund from Smarter Balance because of the delayed implementation of those formative tools. We're proposing utilizing those dollars to contract with the County Office of Education and West Ed in order to provide additional training to teachers on the Smarter Balance assessment system. We would also request funding for Proposition 98 to fund 6 assessment fellows. The department, through foundation dollars, has been able to hire 4 assessment fellows that are part-time staff throughout the state. We're requesting 2 more. These are individuals that go out to school sites, will meet with teachers, will meet with principals, and provide technical assistance. And then lastly, a block grant. Thank you.
We're going to hold these issues open until the May revision. Next, we're going to proceed to issue number 8, a finance letter.
Okay. These are all largely technical in nature. They reflect additional funds or less funds than we anticipated when the governor's budget was first put forth. Mostly federal funds, a few small general fund items. So our recommendation would be to approve all of these with the exception of the final issue, number 13 on page 26, where staff are still working on reconciling numbers.
Proceed.
We would agree with the LAO's recommendations.
Okay. Department of Finance.
Kim Leahy, Department of Finance. We agree with the LAO's recommendation.
Okay. Again, this issue will be held open until the May revision. And they did. Okay. And we want to hear now public comment on these 2 issues combined, issues number 7 and number 8. Please line up right here. Thank you. 1 minute or less, please.
Okay. My name is Stephanie Crow, and I'm here on behalf of California Against Slavery in support of SB 1165. And I just want to tell you briefly, from my perspective, I grew up here in Sacramento in one of the rougher neighborhoods, and I saw trafficking as part of the landscape of my daily life. And even still, when I myself was approached by a trafficker, I didn't see the signs, and I think this education is important. I ended up putting myself in a bad situation, was kidnapped and raped, and from that time forward, my whole life changed. So I just wanted to have you guys support that and get this education out before it's too late and to help others.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ashley Bryant. I'm the founder of 3 Strands Global, and we are a 5-year-old NGO that combats human trafficking, and we have educated and trained over 10,000 students, high school students, on human trafficking awareness. Using our research, we've seen that, as most things, prevention is the most powerful tool that we have to fight against human trafficking. Our research also shows that using and developed training not only increases the overall awareness It also shows students themselves how to avoid victimization. All this can be accomplished at a significantly lower cost than any post-victimization treatment. And this, of course, doesn't account for the human and emotional cost of victimization. As you're all aware, trafficking is one of the fastest growing crimes in the world, and our best hope for stopping and reversing this growth is to educate our youth so they understand how to keep themselves safe and also create the next generation of abolitionists. I urge you to fund this contract so that human trafficking education would be included in our state's health class framework.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. I'm also a volunteer for California Against Slavery, their policy teams and other groups. And also I'm Ambassador of Hope for Shared Hope International. And I didn't even know what Ashlyn was going to say, but I just want to reiterate that I'm in support of what she said in agreement. And actually, I'm from University of California. And just like a couple weeks ago, I happened to give a child sex trafficking workshop to students here lobbying. And I would say even they are vulnerable. So I certainly hope we can get this prevention education to middle school students that are the most vulnerable and are actually being targeted. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Good morning, Deborah Brown with Children Now. Speaking on a more technical, but what we do see as an important issue on item 8 on the finance letters. The second item, we do support the finance revision on item 2 as it relates to CalPADS, with an important exception. We think that it carries some problematic language, which is the condition of the receipt of the funds for CalPADS, where it specifies that it prohibits the department from adding additional data elements to CalPADS or even enhancing the system beyond the data elements and functionality that are identified in the most current approved feasibility study. And so as some folks will remember, that this issue did come up when we were trying to add the transitional kindergarten information into CalPADS, and so we did lose 1 year of data on that. So we urge you to delete this language and not to approve that part of the budget trailer bill this year. We believe it's restrictive and will cause excessive delays, even when finance does approve the data improvements being sought. Thank you.
Okay. Again, this issue will be held open until the May revise. Last issue is informational only, and I know Mr. Ting asked to agendize this, and so we wanted to wait a second. Is he on his way back? Okay, we'll wait here for a split second. Coldness probably motivated me now.
Yeah.
A tad chilly. Just for us.
Okay. That's okay. We wanted to wait for you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll reconvene and hear issue number 9. Okay. Are we going to go in order on the agenda? Okay, great. Joe Michael, Advocate Equality California.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Joe Michael for Equality California. Despite significant progress in non-discrimination law in educational settings, LGBT students in California often face verbal, physical, and online harassment. In 2013, 91% of California students often reported hearing anti-LGBT remarks, 7 in 10 reported being called names or threatened based on their sexual orientation, and nearly 1/3 reported physical harassment or assault. These problems have direct effects on student performance. LGBT students who have experienced harassment have significantly lower GPAs. When students feel unsafe, they miss out on class time. Even more alarming, lesbian, gay, and bisexual youth are 3 to 4 times more likely to attempt suicide compared with straight youth. And from the words of those we've lost, we've known that unaddressed harassment in school is all too often a cause. Under existing law, students have a right to appeal decisions to their local education agencies and the decision that they make regarding their complaints to the California Department of Education, and CDE must process an appeal within 60 days. Despite this, Equality California has received continued reports of a lack of enforcement of anti-discrimination laws in school settings from a number of different sources steadily over the past few years. In 2012, Senator Ricardo Lara and then Assemblymember Betsy Butler submitted a request to the Joint Legislative Audit Committee on the implementation of school safety and non-discrimination laws, including whether appeals to CDE are getting resolved. When the audit was released in 2013, we found that students are indeed not receiving a prompt review of their complaints or an independent review, which is required under existing state law and regulations. The state auditor recommended that by spring 2014, CDE report to this committee and the Senate Budget Subcommittee on what actions they have taken to improve their processing of appeals. To our knowledge, CDE has not submitted any such report in writing. Meanwhile, EQCA and other organizations continue to receive reports of appeals that have not been addressed due to exceeding the deadline for processing. Many of these reports come from local organizations whose staff are working hard to support LGBT youth, many of whom have experienced bullying and harassment exacerbated by a response from their local education agency that was lacking, misguided, or sometimes even motivated by bias. The process to appeal such decisions is not only long, but often ends without any resolution. In addition, it has come to our attention that CDE may not be completing all the compliance reviews they are required to do under existing law. For example, under the Safe Place to Learn Act, CDE must ensure compliance with that law as part of its regular monitoring and review at the local level, the categorical program monitoring process. These regular compliance reviews, if properly completed, would ensure schools have up-to-date non-discrimination policies in the first place that enumerate all the protected categories under existing law, including sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. We've raised the issue of unresolved UCP appeals a number of times over the past few years in a number of contexts, including in meetings with CDE, and we continue to receive reports of unresolved appeals. We'd like to better understand the barriers at CDE that are preventing expeditious appeals, or to see a report to the legislature on these issues that was called for in the 2013 audit, so that we can better partner to find solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Department of Education.
Monique Ramos on behalf of the Department of Education. So the Department of Education does have a backlog in its Office of Equal Opportunity, which is the office that oversees discrimination and civil rights types, uniform complaints. The backlog was partially created, frankly, out of the audit. One of the recommendations from the audit made recommendations about changing about how we hear these items, and resulted in much longer review of these items. And what had happened was essentially we did not have enough staff to support all those. So the backlog at the beginning of the year was 245 total cases. The department has redirected resources, and as of March of this year, we had closed approximately 100 cases. Right now, we have approximately 145 cases open. Many of these cases are extremely complex, as they can touch on multiple areas of law. You can have a single case touching on pupil fees, students with disabilities, and potentially even an LGBT issue. Currently, based upon our estimation, we have less than 30 LGBT cases still in the backlog. What we have done internally to kind of remedy this issue until we receive, hopefully, the additional funding in governor's budget is we have redirected resources to staff 1.5 positions in order to go through that. Our legal office has redirected some of their team to help with training and help review. They met as quickly as yesterday, and they're meeting again tomorrow in several-hour blocks to go through some of these more complex cases. What we would recommend is allowing us to finish trying to resolve this backlog next year, and then coming back with potential requests for either reforming the system or for potentially staff increases in here. I think we need to get through the backlog to see where we are. I would also add that the UCP process isn't a perfect process. And the department prior to this request was considering legislation in order to alter the complaint process. The department sometimes its hands are tied behind its back because we have to receive information from a school district and from a parent. And if we don't receive that information within 60 days, we can't complete the investigation within 60 days. If we receive that information in 45 days, sometimes that's still not enough time, and the department has no tools in order to force districts, much less parents, to provide that information to us. So we definitely think it's a need to look at UCP, not just in this area, but UCP throughout many programs, and would actually encourage the legislature to take that into thought as they're, moving bills right now that try to move up the UCP process for review in 2 pieces of legislation that are moving forward. So we're happy to answer any questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. No, Department of Finance. No.
I'm sorry.
The Department of Finance want to interject on this?
Ed Hansen, Department of Finance. I just note, as noted in the previous issue, the governor's budget is providing $207,000 for the department to address the UCP backlog.
And you think that will adequately tackle the issue?
We believe so. We provided the $100,000 at one time for the department to be able to tackle the backlog, and we think it's sufficient.
Thank you. Assemblyman Ting?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for indulging us in hearing this very important issue. As Mr. Michael pointed out, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network's 2013 National School Climate Survey raised a number of significant concerns regarding this community and fairly kind of alarming statistics about how often there are anti-LGBT remarks or threats or physical harassment. Just going back to Ms. Ramos, can you describe, you mentioned that the audit may have added to the backlog. What recommendation did the audit make, and what was the prior process, and what's the current process?
So, and I have not completely reread the audit, so one of the recommendations was that we had to review every single complaint that came before us, regardless of whether we had jurisdiction or not. So, for instance, we had one complaint that recently came before us that has been closed out, which is why I'm sharing it, that community member did not receive enough time before a local board to discuss an LGBT issue, but the anti-LGBT side received more time. That is not something we have legal authority over. That's an open meeting law issue. Sure. So normally we would have just closed that out and explained we didn't have the resources, we didn't have jurisdiction over that area. The auditor recommended that we review each of those complaints, which involves staff watching 6 hours of video to basically determine that perhaps they didn't receive enough time, but we had no legal authority to do anything about it. So that is what has led to a lot of the backlog.
I mean, was the auditor prescriptive about what review meant and how much review that the department had to do? I guess I'm just trying to understand whether or not the department, I understand that audit made a recommendation, but is the department going overboard with that recommendation?
We don't think we are, which is one of the reasons we frankly want to seek legislation, is to provide clarity around this. So this is also currently all prescribed in regulations, which is probably not the best place for it, given that there's an expanding area of law surrounding UCP. We think it needs a home in law, and we think that we need to seek better clarity, which is why we'll do a bill next year.
And is there a reason why you want to wait till next year versus trying to do something during this legislative cycle?
I think we would like to get through the backlog to have a little bit of a better understanding where things are before we proceed, and we also have not had enough internal conversations, I think, really to make a strong recommendation. And we'd like to engage with stakeholders. Stakeholders also, we've made a request about altering the UCP process, not related to these types of complaints, but to other complaints. And unfortunately, no one's come up with a great idea yet, not that we've pushed. Sure. So it's a difficult area.
And do you get a sense, I know everything's case by case, but do you get a sense approximately how many hours or a range of hours each case is taken?
I think it completely depends because some of these cases are so complex, particularly if they touch on special education, which is the majority of the complaints we receive. It's just very complex.
Regarding the backlog, so given the additional resources you're moving into this division, you feel confident that you'll be able to finish. I believe you said there was 100 some cases, 100.
There's 145 open cases, and right now we believe that what's been given to us in governor's budget should resolve the backlog, along with the internal resources, particularly that we've redirected. But we will be back next year if we feel that we need more resources moving forward.
And I'm sorry, so 145, you plan on finishing for the fiscal year, or I'm sorry, about the calendar year? I just want to clarify that.
I didn't state. We're moving as quickly as possible, to be honest with you. So the goal is to get it done the soonest we can get it done, that's the goal right now.
I understand, but I don't see that. Soonest is not something on the calendar, so I'm trying to understand from a calendar. And you talked about coming back next year. I'm just trying to understand, are you talking next fiscal year, next calendar year?
So we can
June is a big difference from December.
Sure. So what we can do is go ahead and provide you an update as to where we are sometime, even at the end of session, if you would like a status update as to where we are, and we can come back with kind of a budgetary discussion next budget cycle, and we could have that conversation in December or January if you'd like.
Well, end of session is mid-September, so I'm trying to understand when will these 140 cases be done. So
I can't give you a concrete answer because it took 4 attorneys and 2 staff 4 hours to address 2 cases yesterday.
No, I understand, but you just said previously in your previous comments you're going to move a staff person in half, and I don't want to overly simplify, but you said you felt confident that you were going to be able to finish this backlog within the year. And I'm just trying to understand, when you say the year, what does that I'm just trying to clarify your own statement that you made.
Given that the resources are for the fiscal year, I believe that we could do it within the fiscal year.
Okay.
Although the goal would be to get it done sooner than June 30th of 2016.
So I think what would be then I think what would be helpful. Obviously, our committee doesn't convene after the budget, but perhaps we can at least get an update by letter, or perhaps if the chair sees fit to have another hearing. But it would be great that, as we get sort of, toward the end of June, to have an update as to the status of where those 140 cases are and how many are pending and what's left and how, frankly, how it's going.
We can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ting, for bringing this item to our attention. And certainly we want to see it resolved. And there aren't just a number; these are real people out there in our state who have, issues that I think need to be addressed. So they continue with their education in California. That's their first and biggest priority. And hopefully, as noted too, the prior item will have some resources to address that. But we need to make sure that we push forward and address these issues that are outstanding. So we'll continue to monitor it. And again, thanks for bringing this to our attention. This is an informational item. And with that, we will adjourn. Thank you.
In the future, if you could reach out to me, because executive office.